Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah Harihi Om Dhyayamo Dhavalavagunthanavatim Tejomayim Naishtikim Snigdhapangavilokinim Bhagavatim Mandasmitashrimukhim Vatsalyamritavarshiniim Sumadhuram Sankirtanalapinim Syamangim Madhusiktasuktim Amritanandatmikam Om Amriteshwaryai Namah Om Amriteshwaryai Namah Om Amriteshwaryai Namah Om Amriteshwaryai Namah. Let us continue with our discussion on Bhaja Govindam. It's a Friday today. We've discussed the 19 verses till now. So as always, let us quickly recap, look at the gist of every verse so that we can move on to the 20th verse today with the context. So the first verse was about letting go of the unnecessary technicality of life that we define, making life complicated, and call out to the divine rather. 2, to overcome greed, to accumulate wealth, rather try to go beyond that tendency. Third one was to overcome our fixation on the physical appearance. All that we have in terms of the physical appeal is temporary in nature. Understand that and go beyond. Fourth one was about how life is so unpredictable, so be prepared for whatever surprises we have that come to us, that life gives us. Fifth one is about relationship, how people will have big following as long as we have wealth and we have abilities. And once that depletes, even the following deteriorates. So just understand the nature of relationships. The sixth one is about how as long as we have life, we'll have consideration. As life leaves the body, it's just natural that we get forgotten. Seventh one was about how in every phase of our life we are fixated upon something or the other and we waste our faculty not thinking about the supreme unchanging truth ever. The eighth one was about, again summing it up, relationship, finally trying to understand who am I actually. With all the definitions I have about myself, who am I really beyond all these temporary tags that I associate with myself. The ninth one was about, so once we are setting into this path of spiritual growth, where do we begin? Begin with good company. Good company will lead us to detachment. That will help us overcome delusion. That is what is going to lead us to the supreme truth. The 10th one is about, it just again reminds us of all the things that we consider significant at one point of time in our life are not going to be significant anymore in a later period of time. So why get obsessed by them is the 10th verse. The 11th one, not just getting obsessed, why take unnecessary pride? Because the pride that we take is also going to be impermanent in nature, because what we take pride is going to be upon these impermanent things. The 12th verse is about how life throws at us dual experiences. There are two in nature, that which are pleasant and otherwise. We would be successful in life if we least get pulled away by the emotions of each of these experiences. 13th one stresses on good company, and in this case we were also discussing about company of a Sadguru, which eventually takes us, or is the only way that takes us across the unending or the infinite ocean of samsara, the infinite ocean of life and death, the vicious cycle. The 14th verse was about, now that we are thinking of spiritual growth, remind ourselves the spiritual growth shouldn't be an outwardly growth, rather it should be an inward growth. The inward growth, just outward show off, is not what spiritual growth is about. The 15th and the 16th verses were about desires. How, in spite of getting old, in spite of losing all our abilities, in spite of losing wealth, in spite of losing people, we still don't lose our grip on desires. We hold on to it so tight. 17th one about austerities and rituals and all the various things that we do. Don't get bound by them. We need to know that they are just tools and we need to go beyond at some point of time. The 18th verse was about dispassion. When we have dispassion, whatever be the situation, good or bad we are, whatever be the nature of our life, we could ever be happy. And continuing with the discussion of happiness, the 19th verse was about, once we have our mind fixated or fixed on the supreme, whatever be the situation, however conducive or otherwise it is, we can ever remain happy and content. Was the 19th verse that we discussed. So we are moving on to the 20th verse, which touches upon this interesting topic of death. So as we have seen, all these various verses are talking about or touching upon various different topics which we deal with as part of spiritual contemplation and discussion. So the 20th verse is about death. So let's move on to the 20th verse. It goes as Bhagavad-Gita kinchitadhita Ganga jalalava kanika pita Sakradapi yena murari samarcha kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. So let's first look into the pronunciation word by word as always, and then move on to the meaning, and then discussing about this verse. So please repeat after me twice. Bhagavad, Bhagavad, Bhagavad. Gita, Gita, Gita. If the I did not have a bar over it, it would be Gita. And if A also did not have bar over it, it would be Gita. So because I and A both have bars over them, so it is Gita. Both of them are long. Kinchit, Kinchit, Kinchit. Adhita, DH, Dha. Adhita. Twice. Adhita. Adhita. Bhagavad Gita kinchit adhita. Next line. Ganga. 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 Jala. 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 Lava. 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 Karnika, N with the dot below, so rolling your tongue up, retroflex, na. Karnika, Karnika, Karnika. Pita, Pita, Pita. It's a long I, Pita. Ganga Jalalava, Karnika Pita. The third line, Sakrita, Sakrita. Sakrita. So it is Sakrit Api. Together it would be Sakritapi. 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 Yena. 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 Murari. 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 Samarcha. 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 Sakrita. Sakridapiyena Murari Samarcha. Kriyate. kriyate, kriyate. Tasya, tasya, tasya. Yamena, yamena, yamena. Na, na. Charcha, charcha, charcha. Kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. Kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. The term charcha reminds me of how in India you typically refer to a church as church. The R, because it is CHURCH. So it's church. Okay, so the verse is Bhagavad-Gita kinchitadhita Ganga jalalava kanika pita sakrudapi yena murari samarcha kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. So let us chant it in tune. We'll do it twice. If you're not familiar, listen to the first time and then join for the second time. If you're familiar, let's do it twice. Bhagavad Gita kinchitadhita Ganga jalalava kanika pita Sakridapiyena murari samarcha kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. Once more. Bhagavad Gita kinchitadhita Ganga jalalava kanika pita sakridapiyena murari samarcha kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. So what does the verse tell us? Bhagavad Gita. Gita, anything in form of a metered phrase, a poem, a song. Bhagavad Gita. Gita, a song or a poem from Bhagavan, from Lord Krishna, referring to Lord Krishna. So that's why it's Bhagavad Gita. There are so many different Gitas. There is Ashtavakra Gita, which is the teachings of sage Ashtavakra. So Bhagavad Gita is the teachings of Lord Krishna in a metered form. Bhagavad Gita. Kinchit, little bit, little. Kinchit. Adhita, one who could subjugate to, or one who could subscribe to, or one who could at least imbibe it, absorb it. So Bhagavad Gita kinchit adhita, someone who could at least to a little extent imbibe the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. Ganga jalalava kanika pita is the second line. Ganga referring to the holy Ganges, holy Ganga river. Jala, water. Lava, little. Kanika, kanika, a drop. Even a little drop, pita, to drink. So even if someone could even taste a little drop of the Ganga river, so one who could imbibe the teachings of Bhagavad Gita even a little bit, or at least taste a little drop of the holy Ganga river. Sakrudapi yena murari samarcha. Sakrudapi. Sakrit, to do something without any condition, immediately and once for all. It has both these meanings. Sakrit api. Also. Yena, one by who? Murari. Murari is Lord Krishna's name. We'll discuss about why he gets that name. Murari, Lord Krishna's name. Samarcha. Sam archa. Unconditionally worship. So one who could unconditionally worship once for all, immediately without any condition. Who? The divine, in this case referring to Lord Krishna as Murari. Kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. Kriyate, kriyate to do. Kriyate tasya, such a person's. Yamena, with Yama. Yama is the Lord of Death. With Yama, this person do, not do. So doesn't have to do. Doesn't have to do what? Charcha, any kind of negotiation or any kind of agreement that he needs to have with Yama. Or in plain words, he doesn't have to fear the Lord of Death. So the summarizing the points that this verse is trying to put forth, it says, one who imbibes at least a little of the teachings of the great Bhagavad-Gita. 2, or one who could inculcate or imbibe the purity that the holy river Ganga represents. Even if we can imbibe a little of that purity in our thoughts, actions and words. Or 3, if we could at least once unconditionally pray or devote to the divine. In this case, the term used is Murari. We'll discuss why Murari. So even if we could unconditionally pray or express devotion, unconditional devotion even for a little bit, such a person doesn't have to fear the Lord of Death, is what this verse is trying to convey to us. Imbibing Gita's teachings at least a little bit, or imbibing the purity of Ganga at least a little bit, or at least once pray to the divine with full devotion. Such a person will not have to fear the Lord of Death. The third point especially, even if the teaching says, Adi Shankaracharya and his disciples, their teaching says, even if we can express devotion for a little bit, we don't have to fear death, which basically means we don't do even that, right? It's a revelation. We don't even do that, or we don't express that real devotion even for a little bit, because if we do that, we don't have to fear death, is what they are mentioning here. So there are 3 things that are mentioned in this verse. One is Bhagavad Gita. The second one is Ganga. Third one, devotion towards Murari, to the divine. And the fourth one, of course, is about the Lord of Death. So these are the 4 things. Let us look into what would it mean when we want to understand it from a spiritual perspective, not just literally what the verse says. So starting with Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a very precious gift that we have. We've discussed the 2nd chapter quite some time back. We discussed even the 15th chapter. And we discussed how the Bhagavad Gita comprises of 700 verses divided into or organized into 18 chapters. And Bhagavad Gita is perhaps the best summary of the Vedic teachings, the Vedantic principles that is made quite accessible, quite understandable and digestible by people. So Lord Krishna, his teachings of the ultimate Vedic principles and the teachings of the Vedas that he put forth to Arjuna, through Arjuna to all of us, which Veda Vyasa versified, is perhaps the best abridged version of, I wouldn't say abridged version, the best summary of the Vedantic teachings, the Vedic teachings. It covers everything. It's vast. The teaching is all encompassing. It covers every aspect of spiritual growth, be it whether we want to attain perfection through selfless action, karma yoga, or whether we want to do it through knowledge, jnana yoga, or whether we want to do it through devotion, letting go of ego and surrender, bhakti yoga, or if we want to do it through perfecting our actions, Raja Yoga, constant practice and perfection. It touches upon all the various topics, be it death, be it Atma, be it the Purusha, be it, anything, and most of the topics that we come across when we have a spiritual discussion. Bhagavad Gita kind of covers all of them. As a matter of fact, the Bhagavad Gita Dhyana Shloka, there are few verses in the Bhagavad Gita Dhyana Shloka, the meditation verses of Bhagavad Gita. The fourth verse amongst the meditation verse goes as Sarvopanishado gavo dogdha gopalanandana partho vatsa sudhir bhokta dugdham gitamritam mahat. Sarva Upanishado gavo, all the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the ending part of each of the Vedas. That's why they are called Vedanta, the end of the Vedas, the end, the philosophical part of the Veda. So all the Upanishads are like cattle, are like cows. Dogdha, the one who milks the cow is who? Gopala Nandana. Gopala, the cow herd. Nandana, the cowherd boy, the cowherd Lord Krishna, who was brought up in Gokula in the cowherd clan. And Partha Arjuna, Vatsa, he is a calf. Sudhir Bhokta, one who consumes the milk. The Lord Krishna milks it. The Upanishad is the cow that gives the milk, and Arjuna is the calf that consumes that milk. And what is the milk? Gita, Gitamritam Mahat, the immortal Gita, Mahat, the great immortal Gita is the milk that we churn out of the Upanishad. So Gita is that gist of the Upanishad that we churn, that Lord Krishna helped churn out of the big cattle of Upanishad, and through Arjuna, who was the Vatsa. Because typically the ancient times, even now in rural India, it happens wherein cows are part of the family. A family would have 2 or 3 or few cows, and it is a tradition that first the calf has the authority over the milk. So let the calf drink the milk, and only when the mother cow sees the baby cow does the milk become available, and then the calf drinks whatever it wants, to its heart full, to its stomach full, and whatever is left is what is then milked to be drunk by human beings. That's how it traditionally has been. So Arjuna is that calf which helps, or he's the instrument through which the teachings Lord Krishna passed on to us through him. So he's that calf. So Bhagavad Gita is such a precious gift given to us, so that the teachings of the Veda is available much more in a digestible form, or much more in a form that we can perceive much better, much more in a perceivable form. And Bhagavad Gita, Amma just mentioned about it just a few days ago during the webcast, how Mahabharata war is a perfect example of the situation between dharma and adharma. Most of us, most of the time, are always torn between these two principles, dharma and adharma, be it in a meeting at work, or be it marrying someone, be it in a relationship with someone, being taking up a particular responsibility, being it to make a business decision, trying to buy a house, or accepting a new job, whether we are switching a job, whether we are quitting a job. We are always torn between, oh, is this right or is this wrong? Will this do me good or will this be otherwise, right? We are always in such a situation, and Mahabharata represents that very thing. There is dharma on one side, the Pandavas. There is adharma on the other side, the Kauravas. And what does Lord Krishna do? He takes the chariot right in middle of both the armies, and that's where Bhagavad Gita is advised to Lord Krishna. And I was just mentioning a few days ago how Lord Krishna didn't take Arjuna up in the Himalayan mountains to teach him the ultimate teachings of the Veda. Rather, he taught him in the battleground, in middle of the battleground, between the two armies, right when the war was about to begin. Which basically teaches us, as Amma says, or what Amma said even a few days ago when she discussed about it. The spiritual principles aren't something we just sit in solitude, and of course it will be good if we have a conducive environment like Himalayas. But the application of that has to be in our day-to-day life. Every teaching of Vedas, every teaching of all the scriptures, they have to be applicable in our day-to-day life. Only then are we actually understanding the teachings. Else, they just always remain like textbook knowledge. They are of no use to us. They would be of no use to others. And the 18 chapters of Bhagavad-Gita, like I mentioned, they touch upon all the various aspects. The karma, jnana, raja and raja yoga, and bhakti yoga. Whatever be the way that we choose to progress in our spiritual journey, Bhagavad Gita has a teaching, has guidance for each one of those. And Amma always tries to clarify this. If we choose that, oh, I want to take the path of knowledge, doesn't mean all the three are of no use. We need them too. Just that we are prioritizing this one particular path, we need the others too. Like if we take math as our major, doesn't mean we don't learn chemistry or biology or physics. We do need them to some extent, but we are prioritizing math. We pay more attention to math. It's all it means. Doesn't mean all the other paths are inferior or we don't need them, or anyone else who is taking the other path is inferior to us. Similarly, if we take the path of selfless action, karma, doesn't mean we don't need any knowledge. Just keep doing karma. Just doing blind karma is of no use either. So we need the others too. Just that what we prioritize, what we are paying more importance to or more attention to is what it means when we take a particular path. Anyway, Bhagavad Gita has the teachings for all these various paths that we could take. And that's why it's so precious. It is all encompassing. And we discussed during the chapter 2. Bhagavad Gita strikes upon the very fundamental answer to all our problems. Arjuna's problem was, he was despondent looking at his kith and kin, telling, I cannot fight. And Lord Krishna's teachings was not about, look at him, he's so bad, look at him, he's so old, look at him, he's not nice. He didn't go there. His teachings, as we discussed in the chapter 2, was try to understand who you truly are. Try to understand what is the supreme truth, what is not the supreme truth. And through that prism, look at this particular situation. Try to understand what is dharma, what is adharma, and then act accordingly. That's all what Lord Krishna's teachings was throughout the Bhagavad Gita. And the beauty of Bhagavad Gita is touching upon the very substratum, the very fundamental solution to any problem. As a matter of fact, every problem that we have, be it relationship, be it at work, be it in the satsang, be it anywhere else, any social cause, if we get to this very point, understanding what is permanent, what is impermanent, through that prism understanding what is dharma and what is adharma, it would have a solution for everything. Only thing is we don't have the patience and the attitude of getting to that point. Anyway, so Bhagavad Gita, kinchitadhita, if we can grasp at least a little. Lord Adi Shankaracharya and his disciples aren't saying learn the whole of Bhagavad Gita, imbibe everything. Even if we take a little of that teaching in our life, that is going to make a big difference, is what the first line of the verse says. The second one is about Ganga. Ganga is considered the most precious, most revered river in the Indian subcontinent, as per the Indian tradition in Sanatana Dharma. It says, take even a sip or consume even a drop, a little drop from Ganga, will take us to this situation wherein we don't fear death anymore. Doesn't literally mean you take a sip of Ganga and everything is done. In which case, anyone who lives by the banks of Ganga would be a liberated soul, right? The essence here is what Ganga represents. Ganga represents the perennial flow of knowledge. As a matter of fact, the whole legend, how the Puranas explain the story of Ganga, there's a lot of prelude to this particular event wherein Ganga finally arrives on earth. Let's not get to that. Finally, it comes to a situation where the sage Bhagiratha, he is instrumental in bringing the holy Ganges from the heavens down onto earth, is how the Puranas point out. Various Puranas talk about it. And the might of Ganga was so much that earth couldn't bear the force of Ganga. So sage Bhagiratha prays to Lord Shiva to help. Please help earth from the force of Ganga. So Lord Shiva says, I will take the force up upon my head. Let Ganga flow onto my head. And then through his hair locks, it flows down onto earth. So that's the belief. And that's what, I guess, that image that you have in the verse. The slide that we have of the verse. It shows Lord Shiva, right? Ganga coming down, Lord Shiva takes it upon his head, and through his dreadlocks, his hair locks, Ganga flows down onto the earth. So when we look at it symbolically, Lord Shiva represents, he is the third aspect, creation, sustenance, and dissolution. Lord Shiva represents dissolution. Dissolution means what? It's not about destroying. It's not about bombing places and destroying places. Dissolution is about how something gets created, something sustains, and it has to dissolve at some point of time. So dissolution is the teaching to us that anything in the physical realm is impermanent in nature, right? So Lord Shiva represents that teaching, that everything we have around is impermanent. Anything that gets created sustains for some time and will get dissolved, has to disappear. So it is that ultimate knowledge of the very nature of this world is what Lord Shiva represents. And from his head is what Ganga flows. So it's Ganga represents that perennial flow of knowledge, perennial flow of wisdom. Our dealing with something would definitely differ if we realize it is not permanent in nature, right? Like the example of train travel or airplane travel or a rental car or a rented house that Amma gives, that we have discussed a few number of times. We are much more matured when we deal with a rental car than when we deal with a car that we are going to have for a long time. We'll think, oh, let me clean it the next week, let me clean it the next month, and the car gets accumulated with all the dust and whatever filth we would have in the car. But with a rental car, we know we have to return it in 2 days, so we need to keep it clean. We need to clean it right away. We need to fill gas. We cannot wait till it empties up, etc. Right? Our dealing with anything that is impermanent, with the understanding that it is impermanent, we'll automatically have maturity towards it. So that knowledge is what Lord Shiva represents, and that's what is flowing down in form of Ganga. So the second line says, Ganga jalalava kanika pita. If we could drink even a little bit of that knowledge, if we could bring in that knowledge into our action, at least a little bit, that will do us good. That will take us to a stage wherein we don't have to fear the death, the Lord of death. So at least a little bit of the Bhagavad-Gita teachings, or at least a little bit of what the knowledge, the flow of knowledge, Holy River Ganga represents. If we could consume at least a little bit of that. Third one, Sakradapi yena murari samarcha. To, at least for a little while, for a bit, devote yourself to Murari. Unconditionally pray, call out to Murari. Murari is Lord Krishna's name. Mura is the name of a demon. Ari in Sanskrit translates to enemy, foe. So Murari, one who is against Mura, Lord Krishna, who put an end to Mura. Mura had the boon, like we have discussed, every asura has a boon some way or the other to overcome death. That's how negativities are, right? Every negativity that we have, they'll find some way or the other to stay in us. So asuras are like that. And his thing was he would never get killed in a physical combat. He'll never get killed in a physical combat or in a physical war with someone, a duel with someone else. So he thought, if he doesn't get killed in that way, he'll never get killed. So he's going to be eternal, is what he thought. He's going to be immortal. But Lord Krishna puts an end to him. So the sequence goes wherein Narakasura or Bhaumasura, how he's referred to both these names. Another demon, much more stronger demon. He abducted 16,000 women and he locked them all up in his fortress, his fort palace, a fortress palace. And Mura. Mura was a good friend of Narakasura, Bhaumasura. And he says, I will help you. I will guard this palace. Because they know Lord Krishna is coming to rescue all these women. And when Krishna comes, Mura says, fight me. Only once you fight me can you go into the palace. And Lord Krishna finally puts an end to Mura using his Sudarshana Chakra. Again, the image that we have on the slide with the verse. Lord Krishna with his Sudarshana Chakra, the discus that he has. And that is the ultimate weapon of annihilation of ego. No form of negativity can escape that, is how the belief is. And with the Sudarshana Chakra, he puts an end to Mura. So he is known as Murari, one who took upon Mura as a foe and fought him. And then Krishna rescued all the 16,000 women. Of course, in a lighter note, or in many of these Bollywood movies, or many of these stand-up comedy sessions, etc., Lord Krishna is always referred to as a womanizer who had 16,000 wives. As a matter of fact, having even one wife is quite difficult, or even having one husband is quite difficult. But Krishna had to deal with 16,000 wives. Why did he deal with 16,000 wives? Because they got abducted by Narakasura. No one is ready to accept these women who were abducted by Narakasura. So Krishna says, I will take care of them. Just think about feeding 16,000 women every day. To deal with them every day, to just make one-time food for 16,000 women is not a small pledge. Pardon? Still, you have to pay for the food, even if they make the food. Still, so the 16,000 women is not about someone being a womanizer, rather it's about Tyaga, it's about sacrifice that Lord Krishna represents there. So next time you come across someone asking you this question, we should be able to explain what is the context of why Lord Krishna has 16,000 wives. It's a symbol of sacrifice, it's a symbol of acceptance, a symbol of what do you call for it when we give someone place to be? Shelter. To give shelter to someone unconditionally. And what is the significance of Murari, the term Murari here? We have been talking about wisdom. We are talking about the wisdom about going beyond the physical realm, right? Mura, interestingly, has 5 heads. And that is representative of the 5 elements, the fundamental elements of the physical realm. The physical realm, the 5 fundamental elements, the physical realm is made out of. So when Krishna put an end to the 5, the asura with 5 heads, it basically signifies We need to go beyond just this mortal body that is made out of 5 elements, or anything around us that is made out of the 5 fundamental elements. Try to understand the essence beyond this, because everything that is made out of the 5 elements is impermanent in nature, has to cease at some point of time. So go beyond being just attached to this, rather further. So all these 3 cases, Bhagavad Gita, which talks about try to understand your true self, which we discussed in the 2nd chapter. Ganga, coming from Lord Shiva, again represents about talks about dissolution. Go beyond the physical realm. Third one, Murari, again referring to the very same teaching. Go beyond the 5 fundamental elements. Try to go beyond all this that is made out of the 5 fundamental elements. So once we are no more attached to this physical appearance, the physical existence which is out of this 5 fundamental elements, we would automatically not care about the death. And that's what all the Mahatmas, including Amma, teach us with example, because that's what the 4th line talks about. Kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. There is no negotiation, there is no discussion, there is no bargaining with Yama thereafter. Yama is the god of death, and doesn't mean he's someone bad. He's known as the Dharma Raja. He's the Lord of Dharma. He's someone who's always standing for Dharma. Based on what was Dharma, he'll ever execute that. There's no concession in terms of Dharma, in terms of Yama. For all that we have done, we have to face death whenever it has to come. It's usually, in a joking way, it is mentioned that all the other gods, like the god of rain, the god of water, the god of wind, they can maybe late a little bit. They say it's going to rain at 6 p.m. Probably it'll rain at 7 p.m. But with Yama, he is extremely punctual. The moment it is time, there is just no concession, there is no second thought. Yama is very punctual. So we need to be in very good terms with him. If at all we want to have a bargain or argument or a negotiation with him, we need to have good control over our life. And when do we have that? When we are not bound by the physical existence that we are. Because when we talk about the Atma, the soul, it doesn't perish at all. Yama has no role in that realm. In India, ritualistically, we celebrate death. And many old traditions around the world, they celebrate death because it is a celebration of we getting free from this cage of body. As long as we are in this body, we are bound, we are tied up with so much of our ego and all the technicalities of life that we define unnecessarily, technicalities of life that we define unnecessarily. We get freed from that. So it is celebrated in form of feast or certain rituals that are performed across the world. Especially in Sanatana Dharma, it is always there. So Amma says, death is not something we need to fear. Death is just a period or a punctuation mark or a comma between sentences. After one sentence, the next sentence would continue. It's not an annihilation there. So Amma says, rather live in love than die every moment in fear. When we have that fear, we are dying every moment. Then there's no point of thinking about death because we are already dying. Rather, live in love. When there is love, there is only living. And that is what is signified, that is what is conveyed here. When we get to that level of understanding that anyway the physical body, everything around me is impermanent in nature, I should be more associated with my own true self, then the fear of death automatically disappears. There is no dealing with Yama thereafter. Yama and Chitragupta. Chitragupta is Yama's assistant. He is the one who has all the book of our karma. He looks at it, he says, oh, this guy, he's done a lot of negative deeds, or this guy has done a lot of good deeds, so he needs to go to heaven, he needs to go to hell. Heaven and hell are not up there in the sky or in the nether world. It decides where are we going to be born again. whether it's going to be a conducive environment or otherwise. That's what we refer to as heaven and hell. Because where we live, the way we have our surrounding is what defines whether it is heaven or hell. So if we realize and are not attached unnecessarily to the physical body, automatically we don't have to deal with all this. We are always in heaven, is what this verse is trying to convey to us. The concept or the essence of overcoming death, the Bhagavad-Gita chapter 8 talks about it. Even Kathopanishad talks about it. Kathopanishad is the story of Nachiketas. Nachiketa is the son of Vajashrava, and the father is performing a big yajna, of big sacrificial fire ceremony. And as part of the yajna, you give donations. You give away things that you're attached to. So traditionally it used to be a practice wherein you would give away cows to people or things that would help you build a livelihood. So he saw his father was giving away all worn out, old, thin, useless cows to people. And he goes and questions his father, if at all you're making a donation, why are you giving these useless things away? Rather give healthy cows. That's when you would call it a real donation. The father ignores him, and he again and again points it out to the father. And in the fit of a rage, the father gets so impatient, agitated by the son. In the fit of the rage, he says, so you want me to give away something that I am attached to? I am very attached to you. I give you away to the Lord of Death. And he says, if that is your wish, I will definitely go to the Lord of Death. And as per the Kathopanishad, the sequence goes wherein he goes to Yama, Lord of Death's abode. And he knocks at the door, and he finds out Yama has gone out on a business trip. He'll be back only after 3 days. And he courageously waits there at Yama's doorstep, telling, I will wait until he comes back, because I need to respect my father's wish. And when Yama comes back, he's surprised to see a young boy there standing, because everyone tries to escape me. He is standing there waiting for me for 3 days. So he asks him, and he tells him what happened. And he's so impressed by him that he says, you've been here for 3 days, ask for 3 boons. And as part of, he doesn't ask anything for himself. He asks for his father's forgiveness for his father, give him his father the right attitude, etc. And the third, one last option, what he had, he asked him, ask something for yourself. And he says, I want to know what is the secret of death. So Kathopanishad, same as Bhagavad Gita chapter 8, both of them talk in very same lines, the very same sequence. They don't talk about, after death, the soul goes up, floats up, etc. They're talking about what exactly is death. Death is when we don't understand our true self. That is death. When we understand our true self, we don't have to deal with death. Because we know this body, relinquishing this body and going on to another body is just like changing clothes. We don't make a big deal about the clothes you wear today and the change of clothes that you have tomorrow. Why? Because clothes is just a covering. I am the main big dude, right? It's not the clothes, it's me who is important. Similarly, one who is identified with the soul realizes, changing the body is just change of clothes. I am never dying. So both Kathopanishad and the Bhagavad Gita chapter 8 talk about the very same thing. Of course, they touch various different topics, but the essence of death, the essence of understanding death is at this, to understand who you truly are. Then you don't have to deal with death. In Amma's example, if you look at it, Amma's biography, page 146 to 148, it talks about an incident wherein Suganachan, Amma's biological father, was so disturbed by so many of these miscreants, especially the rationalists, the agnostic people who were against Amma's moods and the way Amma was receiving people, all that Amma did when Amma was young. And they would always create problems for Amma. And, in a remote village, a conservative village, the father is always concerned about the daughter. The daughter should never have an ill name, because back then if a daughter has even a little blemish, no one would marry her. So his concern was also to marry off Amma. Amma needs to have a good groom who would marry her. And if she gets all these bad names, how will she get married? So he had both these. And more of these kept happening. He was so disturbed that one day he said, I have had enough. When Amma's Devi Bhava was going on, he goes to Amma and says, oh, whoever the Divine Mother who has possessed my mother, because she was in Devi Bhava, please go away. I want my daughter back. And Amma asks back, who do you want? You want this body? And he says, I want my daughter back. You need to leave. And Divine Mother says, okay, I am leaving. And Amma just drops down completely unresponsive, drops down dead. She doesn't breathe. Amma's eyes are wide open, but she is completely lifeless, lying there. And seeing that, Amma's sisters, mother, they all faint. And Sugunachan doesn't realize what's happening. And it goes on for hours, for 8 hours. The doctors see there's no pulse in the body. And Amma is just lying there, completely lifeless. And even Sugunachan passes away, looking at the situation. And then when he regains consciousness, he cries out to Amma, telling, oh Amma, please, it's fine. I just want my daughter back with life. Divine Mother, you don't have to go. I just want to see you alive. And after some time, after 8 hours, slowly they start seeing life in the body, is how the incident goes. That's how it is narrated in the biography, page 146 to 148. Again, Amma is teaching about, who do you want? You're talking about your daughter. Is this body your daughter? Then take this body. This body is going to perish anyway. It's going to grow old and perish anyway. But if you're referring to your daughter, which is the Amma within the 5 feet figure, then that is what we need to relate to, not just this body. It's this very teaching, Amma, or I grasp from this incident, from Amma's biography, this very teaching, that when you say Amma, is it that body Amma, the 5 feet Amma, or is it Amma which is beyond that body? And this incident verily says Amma is beyond that body, which we need to be connected to. Not that we need to not consider Amma's physical appearance. It definitely has a big significance in our life. But we need to go understand Amma even beyond that 5 feet, which Amma keeps telling. Connect with the Amma which is beyond this 5 feet figure. So again, coming to that, the immortal self that we need to recognize. Once we recognize that, then we don't have to deal with the Lord of Death. One small story, and then we'll end the discussion. Again, the teachings of, like Amma's example, the teaching from the life of Markandeya. Because whenever we talk about Lord of Death, Markandeya is usually talked about. Sage Markandeya, he was the son of sage Mrikandu. And Mrikandu and his wife did not have a child for a long time. So they prayed to Lord Shiva, telling, please help us beget a son. So Lord Shiva tells them, Lord Shiva appears and says, yes, you can have a son. I'll bless you with a son, but you have a choice. You can either have a virtuous, very abled, knowledgeable son who would have a short span of life, or otherwise you can have a son who is otherwise, who may not be into any of these, and he'll have long life. And Mrikandu opts for the son who is virtuous, who would be knowledgeable, who learns all the scriptures, who learns the supreme truth. Because that's the son you would always dream to have. And so be it, Lord Shiva says, and he gets this son who grows up to be a very knowledgeable. He learns Father gives him the opportunity to learn all the teachings of the Vedas. They even do the Upanayana, the thread ceremony, ceremonial way of being a student, and he grasps all the knowledge and he becomes a very virtuous young boy. And then, as he's about to approach 16, his time is it's time for your Lord Yama to come and take him away. His father and mother realize it's time and they become so sad. And when son sees the dad and mom crying, he asks them what happened. They tell them, this is what happened. We opted for you to be virtuous because you'll be virtuous, but you would be taken away when you turn 16 or when you're young as a child. He says, why do we need to bother about that? All these teachings that we have from the Vedas, the scriptures, they tell us we don't have to be bothered about death. Let's focus on devotion to Lord Shiva. Let me pray to Lord Shiva. I know he will protect me. And he builds a Shiva Linga and he gets into penance, worshipping Lord Shiva, completely dedicating himself to Lord Shiva. But when time comes, messengers of Lord Yama come, they try to take him, they are not able to take him. Then Yama himself comes. He says, I will come and get him. So he rides on a buffalo. That's how the symbolically Yama is shown riding on a buffalo, and he has this noose. So whoever's time is about to come, he throws the noose and pulls them out, life out of them, is how the symbolic way of it is. And he throws the noose around Markandeya's neck and he pulls him. Markandeya, like a child, grabbing the mother, hugs Lord Shiva, Shivalinga, and he doesn't let go of Lord Shiva. And it comes to such an extent that the Shivalinga gets pulled out of where it was, and out of that comes Lord Shiva. He appears and he reprimands Yama, telling, stop, don't do this to my devotee. I give him or grant him the boon for being immortal. He doesn't have to deal with you anymore. That is the state we need to get to. We get to that state wherein we identify ourselves not just with the body but with our true self. It could be through the path of devotion, could be through the path of selflessness, through the path of knowledge, self-inquiry, through the path of perfection through action. Through any of these paths, we realize the state not being attached with the physical body. Then we don't have to deal with Yama anymore. We are immortal. We get to that stage of realization wherein we are not this body, we are beyond that. Once we get to that state, we don't have to deal with Yama. Kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. The last line of this verse. We don't have to deal with Yama anymore. So that's what this verse is talking about. So it is 8:29. Perfect timing. We'll end the discussion here. So quickly summarizing what we discussed, if we could take the teachings of Bhagavad-Gita, which talks about realize your true self, or if we take a sip of or a drop of Ganga, which represents that supreme knowledge coming from Shiva, who again talks about dissolution, going beyond the physical existence that we have. 3, Krishna, who overcame the Asura, who represents the 5 elements. So going beyond the physical element, physical attachment that we have to the physical body in the physical realm, we don't have to worry about death anymore. That doesn't mean don't take care of your body. It is our dharma to take care of our body, but treat it as a rental home. Treat it as a rental car. A rental car, will definitely take care of it so that we don't have to pay for any damage that we create, but at the same time, we are never attached to it. We are ready to let go of it. That should be our attitude. Once we develop that attitude, every Mahatma exercises that attitude, exemplifies that attitude. If we develop that attitude, we will never have to deal with Yama, the god of death. So we'll end the discussion. It's 8:30. So do we chant? We chant. Last time we didn't chant. So I think any of you who would want to leave, please feel free to do so. Don't feel compelled to stay back. We'll anyway take a few more minutes and chant the 20 verses that we have discussed till now. Om Amriteshwariyai Namah. So let's chant together. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudhamate, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukran Karane. Moodha jahihi dhanagamatrishna kuru sadbuddhim manasi vitrishna yallabhase nija karmopatam vittam tena vinodaya chittam. Naristana bhara nabhidesham drishtva maga mohavesham etan mamsa vasadi vikaram manasi vichintaya varam varam. Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam tadvajivitam atishaya chapalam vidhi vyadhyabhimana krastam lokam shoka hatam cha samastam yavat vit Toparjana sakta tavan nija parivaru rakta paschajivati jarjarade varta kopina pritchati gehe yavat pavano nivasati dehe tavat pritchati kushalam gehe gatavati vayau dehapaye bharya bibhyati tasmin kaye balastavat kridasak tarunastavat taruni sakta vruddhastavat chintasakta parame brahmani kopina sakta kate kanta kaste putra samsaroyam ativa vichitra kasya tvam kah kuta ayata tattvam chintaya tad iha bhrata satsangatve nissangatvam nissangatve nirmohatvam nirmohatve nischalatatvam nischalatatve jivan mukti vayasi gate kah kama vikara shushke nire kah kasara kshine vitte kah parivara jnate tattve kah samsara ma kuru dhana jana yauvana garvam harati nimeshat kala sarvam mayamidam akhilam hitva brahmapadam tvam pravisha viditva dīnayāminyau sāyam prātah shishiravasanto punarāyātah kālah kridati gacchatyāyuh tadapi na munchati āshāvāyuh kāte kāmta dhanagata cimta nāstvātulakim tava nāsti niyamta trijagati sajjana sangati reka bhavati bhavarnava tarane nauka jatilo mundi lunchita kesha kāshāyāmbara bahukrita vesha paśyannapi chana pasyati mūಢah udaranimittam bahukrita vesha angam galitam palitam mundam dashana vihinam jatam tundam vriddho yati grihitva dandam tadapi na munchati āshāpindam agre vahni prishthe bhanu ratrau chubuka samarpita janu karatala bhikshastarutala vasa tadapi na munchati āshāpāsha kurute ganga sagara gamanam vrata paripalanam athava danam jnana vihina sarvamatena bhajatina muktim janmashatena suramandira moola nivasa shayya bhutalam ajinam vasa sarva parigraha bhogatyaga kasya sukham na karoti viraga yogarato va bhogarato va sangarato va sangavihina yasya brahmani ramate chittam nandati nandati nandatyeva Bhagavad Gita kinchita dhita ganga jalalava kanika pita sakridapiyena murari samarcha kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. Let us conclude sincerely praying to the Almighty that every being in the creation is happy, content and peaceful. Let us chant the Shanti Mantra 3 times together. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Loka Samasta Sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Hari Om.